Howdy. With this video, I want to go over a couple of philosophical questions. These are the questions for the final exam, so I thought I'd give them to you now so you can think about them as we go through the semester. And the idea is not necessarily to come up with a perfect answer to these questions, but to see how writers are examining various ideas and trying to put these ideas into a certain context. And one way to do that is to these philosophical questions. The first question our literature is going to be working with, and again, you do this quite often already, is this question of whether there's truth out there or is everything just kind of relative and based on perception. You see this battle in our culture right now where we're kind of trying to fight it all out. But if you're an essentialist like Plato, when you read the Myth of the Cave, Plato's asserting that there's truth and we can know it and we can live by it. Very much an essentialist kind of idea. An essentialist is going to be believe in truth, that there's a reality to be presented within art. An anti-essentialist is going to have the opposite view where everything's kind of relative. What you call truth is just your perception of the world. And truth might be a little bit different for everybody. And if this truth is different for everybody, then is there anything really out there that's true? That's all about perception. When you come to college or in high school or whatever kind of knowledge you think you have, where does that come from? Is it really knowledge, or is it just one kind of a form of indoctrination, or you just inherited like your parents' bias towards things, and therefore it's kind of more based on perception and things like that. I do believe in moral absolutes. If you believe in truth, you're probably going to apply that to morality, and you're going to have some moral absolutes like the Ten Commandments or something like that. Or does morality kind of depend on the context and the situation you're in? The classic example is, if your children are starving, is it wrong to steal food? Thou shalt not steal, then yeah, it probably is, but given the situation, you don't just sit there and watch your kids starve, right? So does morality depend on whatever context you find yourself in? And you're going to see our writers playing with these ideas a little bit, right? Take a happy, healthy high school student, put them in the big city, take their money from them, and see what starts to happen, right? Hungry dog thinks of nothing but meat, so you start getting hungry, you need money. What are you going to do to survive? Do you live by those moral absolutes, or does your actions guided more by the context you find yourself in? Some interesting questions, especially when we get to the realists. They're going to play with that quite a bit. But if you're kind of an essentialist, history is just this presentation of facts. Journalists report facts. If you're kind of an anti-essentialist, history might be, you might see history more of his story, right? If dead white people are, kind of won the wars, and the dead white people are going to write history, right? Is that really history, or is it just one version of history? And do we need to go back and find other versions of history that we can look at as well? Same thing with journalism. Do journalists report facts, or do they create narratives? And Donald Trump's gotten a lot of traction out of this idea of fake news, right? And a lot of journalists are caught off guard, like, well, wait a minute, we're reporting facts, and some people are like, no, you have a pretty strong bias one certain way, and maybe you're creating narratives to support a particular political view, and Trump just latched onto that, right? And still getting a lot of mileage out of that. But does that mean that all journalism is basically based on bias and perception, and it's just creating one type of narrative or another? How do we learn what facts are? We also see with the internet, social media sites, how do you know what's true, what's not? And it gets kind of interesting, right? So that you can see that's one of the battles within our culture, and you're going to see the writers playing with this quite a bit. But even if you believe in truth, you still got a lot of work to do, right? Where does that truth come from? Does it come from a religious text? Like the Bible or the Quran or whatever. But there's also a lot of people who say that my truth comes from the Bible, but they haven't read it yet. So how does that work? And the writers are going to start playing with that. If you believe in truth, how do you where's that truth located? How do you perceive it? With something like the Bible, who gets to do the correct interpretation of it, right? We got plenty of different churches out there interpreting the Bible in fairly different ways. And if maybe it's not from the book, maybe it's just from the idea of a God, and it comes down from some God or the gods. Plenty of religions out there, right? Does it come from personal experience? Does it come from science? Where does truth actually come from, and how do we apprehend truth and attempt to live our lives by it? And again, our writer's going to be playing with that quite a bit. Sometimes, like I say, if you're reading a work and you're kind of like, I don't know about this, it's probably because they're kind of starting to poke at that a little bit and poking with your particular answer to that question. And again, the point of this class is not for anybody to tell you what to think, but to kind of start seeing how different writers think about some of these different ideas. So kind of very interesting. You can see how we can have some fun with these ideas. So we watched the Truman Show. Where does truth come? How does Truman apprehend truth? And what does he find out at the end of the movie? It's kind of an interesting question. The other question that we're going to work with throughout the semester, this question of free will versus determinism. Are our lives just a product of our various choices we make as we go through, or are we determined by forces beyond our control to think and behave and do certain things? It's kind of an interesting question. Generally, high school students don't have a lot of choice. You're mandated by law to attend school, right? And your parents make a lot of decisions. They hold you kind of that financial ransom over your head. But with the idea of determinism, it's the idea that our free will is limited by genetics. When you first met me, you probably knew I was never a professional basketball player, right? I'm short. I'm not very coordinated. I have to watch the basketball as I dribble. I'm just not good at it. I could practice every day, for hours for the rest of my life. I might get better, but I'm never going to be particularly good at basketball because of my genetics, right? I just was not made for that particular activity. Likewise, your class, how much money you have, determines how much choice you have sometimes, right? Your choices about where you're going to go to college is probably limited by how much money your parents or guardians have. And it's kind of an interesting question. My children are probably not going to go to Harvard because we don't have money for that. So how much money you have limits what you can do. Same thing with race or sex or gender. In terms of biology, if we don't feed our bodies, we don't think about these great philosophical questions. We think about food, right? We have biological needs that we have to meet. And also, if you start putting all this stuff together in terms of biology, I'm not choosing to get old. It's just happening to me, right? I just woke up in the mirror like, whoa, this can't be accurate, but apparently it is. And we don't make that choice. Our bodies limit our free will, and what we can do with our bodies limits our choices we can make. The type of environment you grew up in. If you're born in America, you got certain expectations that people born in other parts of the world may not have. So it gets kind of interesting. You get all these things working on the individual, and how much choice do you really have as you go through life? Are you really choosing to go to college, or is it just kind of an economic necessity so that you can participate in the workforce? Not necessarily by choice. Everybody just has to get a job so they can get money and eat. So it's kind of an interesting question. How much choice do we really have in our lives? And again, it's not necessarily an all or nothing idea here. It might be a little bit more with truth than relativism, but with free will and determinism, we're kind of on this continuum. Probably at different times in your life, you might feel like, I got a lot of free will, but other times it's like, well, no, if we're playing football against a super good team, we can't just choose to win, right? You might be limited by the other team's ability to outplay you a little bit. So all kinds of interesting stuff. And again, our writer's going to start playing with these ideas, and it's just going to be fun, hopefully, for you. But you can also see these ideas playing out in our culture, and when we're fighting like this, all these interesting things are happening. But hopefully that helps a little bit, just kind of get the general idea in there. So you can kind of see, hopefully, for a final exam question, discuss the idea of essentialism versus anti-essentialism as it relates to 2 or 3 works we've read this semester. Apply this idea of free will versus determinism as it plays out through 2 or 3 works we've read this semester. It's a good final exam questions there. And again, we're not trying to find the one perfect answer. We're just going to examine how different writers examine these ideas. And again, maybe it'll change the way you think about things. Maybe it won't. It's fine. The idea of the class is not to tell you what to think, but just show you how other people are thinking about these things. But if you have any questions, be sure to let me know. And we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.